Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Planetarium show. My name is Jessica. I'm the director of the Planetarium, and with me tonight are several of our students who work at the Planetarium. I will let them all introduce themselves and say hi, and we'll start off with Rachel.
Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm a biology major and environmental science minor here at UMD.
Hi, I'm Len. I'm a physics and astronomy student here at UMD.
I'm Eli. I am also a physics and astronomy student at UMD.
Hey, I'm Braden. I'm a music ed major here at UMD.
Awesome. All right, so tonight is our monthly constellation show, where we'll take a look at the stars and constellations that you can find up during the month of December, which I'm really excited about because we're finally getting into the real winter constellations, which are some of my personal favorites. So I'm excited to do this one tonight. Now, as I get set up, as always, if you have any questions throughout the show, feel free to leave them down in the comments. Eli's going to be keeping an eye on that for me. Okay, good, nodding. And will let me know if any questions come up. We'll also have time at the end to take questions as well. All right, let me get switched on over. And there we go. Okay. So for anyone who has not seen any of our live stream star shows, we're using this really cool program called Stellarium, which is basically creates a planetarium on your computer. You put in the date, time, and location that you want, and it shows you exactly what the sky looks like. So that's what we're using. I have it set up for Duluth, since that's where we with the planetarium are located. Although the sky will still look pretty similar to anyone as long as you are in the northern hemisphere. But if you want to see what slight differences there might be, or if for some reason we have a viewer in the southern hemisphere, which we have had before, you can download this program for free and try it out for yourself and see exactly what the sky would look like for you. And I have a link to the site for the program down in the video description. All right. So, as I said, I have this set up for Duluth. It is set up for right now. And because we are well into the end of fall and almost at winter, our sun has already set, so we are well into dark nighttime already, no having to fast forward time for the sun to set. And so we're going to jump straight in to the stars and constellations that we can find here in the north. This is generally where we like to start any star shows because for most people in the northern hemisphere, the stars that sets of stars that we're about to talk about are seen pretty much all year round. So they're a really good kind of launching off point to familiarize yourself with where exactly in the sky you're looking, and then you can go from there to find other stars and constellations that may only be up certain times of the year. So to start us off, we're going to look at these 7 stars right here. This is probably the most familiar set of stars in the northern sky, and this is, of course, our Big Dipper, with the handle and the cup of the Dipper. Now, I hate to break any hearts, but the Big Dipper is actually not a constellation. It's an asterism. It's a smaller grouping of stars within a larger constellation. And in this case, the 7 stars that make up the Big Dipper are the 7 brightest stars in the constellation, the Greek constellation of Ursa Major, or the Big Bear. So to see the bear, we're going to have to add on some other stars and also turn what was our dipper into parts of a bear. So that handle is actually the tail of the bear. Then we have the back, ear, nose, chest, front legs, belly, and back legs. And I'll just turn on the constellation line so you can see that really well. Again, tail, back, ear, nose, chest, front legs, belly, and back legs. At this time of year, our Big Bear is kind of walking along the horizon. Now, accompanying the big bear in the northern sky, we also have a little bear. And the little bear can be a little bit tricky to find, especially if you don't live in an area with very dark skies. So the trick to finding the little bear and the Little Dipper is to actually use the Big Dipper to help. So if we go back to our Big Dipper and we find the front two stars in the cup of the Big Dipper, these two stars are known as the pointer stars because if you connect them in a line and you follow that line, it points you to this bright star here, which is Polaris, also known as the North Star. And the North Star is the end of the handle of the Little Dipper. And so now that we have found the tip of the handle, we can find the handle and the cup of the Little Dipper here. Now, if you're having trouble picking out those stars that make up the Little Dipper, it is not just you. Most of the stars in the Little Dipper are fairly dim, so unless you do have very, very, very dark skies, you're probably only going to see Polaris and the front two stars in the front two stars in the cup of the Little Dipper. Now, our Little Dipper is also our little bear. And so we have a long bear tail and then tiny little bear body here. Again, I'll turn those lines on so that you can see it. And that is our little bear. Now, our bears look interesting, to say the least. I don't know about you, but most, or really any bear that I have seen has not really had a long tail like this. But the Greeks had a story to explain why these bears had these long tails. So this story starts off, as many Greek stories do, with Zeus, the king of the Greek gods. Now, he has a really bad habit of heading down to Earth and finding these villages that are having parties and celebrations and just celebrating with them instead of being back home up on Mount Olympus with his wife Hera. Well, that's exactly what happens in our story. Zeus heads down, he finds this village that's having a party, he's celebrating with them, ends up making friends with a woman named Callisto. And he's just having a good old time until Hera stomps down from Mount Olympus to drag him back home. Now, she has done this so many times in the past that she is just tired of it and decides to punish Zeus, hoping that maybe this will make him stop. So, to punish him, she turns his new friend Callisto into a bear and then drags him back home. Well, Callisto actually has a son named Arcus, and after it had been a few hours since Arcus had seen his mom, he decided to go out looking for her and started out looking in the woods around the village, thinking that maybe she got lost or got hurt, and that's why he hasn't seen her. Well, as he's searching, he comes across this big, beautiful bear that he doesn't realize is actually his mom. So he's getting ready to defend himself in case this bear attacks him. Well, at this time, Zeus had actually snuck back away from home, back down to the village, to see if there was anything he could do to help Callisto out. And he sees Arcus, he sees Bear Callisto, realizes that Arcus is his son, that Arcus is Callisto's son, and also realizes that he can't turn Callisto back human. So he does what he thinks the next best thing is. He turns Arcus into a bear as well, so that they can be together just as bears. But to really try and make it up to them even more, he decided to place them up into the nighttime sky so that they could live together forever. And to get them up into the sky, he picked them up by those bear tails, spun them around, and flung them up into the sky. And it's that process of being spun and flung that stretched out those bear tails, and that's why these two bears have such long tails. And our big bear here is the mama bear Callisto, and our little bear is her son Arcus. All right. Well, let's take a look at a few more constellations that we can find up here in the northern sky. And we're going to use those pointer stars to help us find them. So instead of following those pointer stars all the way up to Polaris, we're actually going to stop at the very first star we come across. This star is the end of the tail of Draco the dragon. So we're going to follow that long winding tail up to his big full belly, over to his head and his eyes and his mouth, and he's breathing fire all over Hercules. And so this is Draco the dragon here. All right, one more constellation we're going to find using those pointer stars. This time, we are going to go to Polaris and then keep on going until we reach this big W in the sky. This W is the Greek constellation of the Queen Cassiopeia. Now, seeing a queen out of a W takes a little bit of imagination. The way we picture her is as if she's sitting in her throne and we're getting kind of a profile view. And so you'd have her head, her back, upper legs, lower legs, and then big long clown feet. And that is our Queen Cassiopeia. Although I have to say there are some other cultures who see this group of stars as different constellations that I think make a lot more sense. So one of my personal favorites is a Persian constellation using these stars, where they see a camel. And this W is the two humps on the camel's back, which I just think makes a lot more sense. I believe there are also a couple of cultures that see this group of stars as an hourglass, which also kind of definitely makes more sense than a queen. Okay, so with the finding of Cassiopeia here, I want to point out one of the many very cool things that you can see up in the nighttime sky that's actually not a star or constellation. So I'm going to turn our sky just a little bit. And what we're going to do is, using that W of Cassiopeia, or your camel humps, or whatever you want this to be, if you take the top half of the W and turn this into an arrow, it's going to point you to this little fuzzy blob here. That fuzzy blob is the Andromeda Galaxy. It is in fact the only galaxy that you can see with your naked eye. You do not have to have a telescope to see it. And this galaxy sits about 2.5 million light years away. You know, not that big of a deal or anything. And it's just kind of remarkable that there's this whole other galaxy that you can actually see with just your eyes. Now, it does look like just a little fuzzy blob to your eye. With a telescope, you can, of course, see it in a little bit more detail. And if you have a camera attached to your telescope that can let you take long exposure pictures, then you can really start to see that beautiful detail in the Andromeda Galaxy. But you can go out and see it with just your eyes and look at an entirely separate galaxy. All right, so I want to turn us over to the west just to point out a few groupings of stars that are still up right now. You've heard us talk about them over the past several months, so I'm not going to go into the actual stories or anything, but I just want to show you that now that we're into December, here is those 3 stars that make up the summer triangle. You can see it's still up, but it's pretty low in the west. So it's not going to be up for very much longer, and it's not really prime time viewing, which is during the summer, which is why it's the summer triangle. All right, and then over here in the southwest, we can also make out Jupiter and Saturn, which are still hanging out in our nighttime sky. They've been around for several months now. And with that, I'm going to turn us over to the east so that we can finally get into some of our winter constellations. Now, they're not all the way up just yet tonight, but as we get deeper into December and, of course, actually get into the winter, these constellations will be up right after the sun sets. So what I'm actually going to do is speed up time just a little bit so that the constellations that I want to talk about are up. Now, as I said, I have to go a bit later into the night if we wanted to see them tonight, but as we get into winter, they'll be up right after sunsets. All right, so I fast forwarded to, we're sitting here at about midnight in order to see all of the constellations I want to talk about. And what we're looking at here over in the southeast is a set of constellations that's known as the Winter Hexagon, because there are 6 very bright, prominent constellations up. Now, you might already spot probably the most well-known of these, and that is, of course, Orion the Hunter. Here with Orion, he has his, of course, 3 belt stars. Then we have his shoulders and his knees. And then this can either be a shield and he's holding a club, or this is a bow and he has some arrows. And so this is Orion the Hunter. Now there's a few things in Orion that are worth mentioning other than just the constellation itself. The star that I have highlighted, this red star that is his left shoulder, this is the star named Betelgeuse, or Betelgeuse, or Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse. I've heard it pronounced several different ways. But you'll notice that the star does actually have a red tinge to it, and that's real. This is actually a red star. Stars do come in different colors. And this star is red because it's a star that's at the end of its life and is in a stage that we call the red supergiant phase. Now, since it's at the end of its life, that means, since this is a very massive star, that it's going to go supernova sometime soon, which in astronomy could mean tomorrow, could mean thousands of years from now. We're not really sure. Now, that may sound scary, a star going supernova, that seems pretty close to us, but we are far enough away that it's not going to affect us. We're not going to get hurt or anything from this supernova. But we are close enough that when this supernova happens, it's going to be so incredibly bright that you will be able to see it up in the daytime sky, which makes me hope that soon is actually soon and not astronomy soon, because I really want to see this. I hope it happens in my lifetime. The other thing in Orion that I want to point out is hanging off of his belt is what's commonly called Orion's sword, and it looks like 3 little points of light. But that middle point of light is actually not a star. It looks a little fuzzy because it's actually a gas cloud, what we call a nebula. And if I zoom on into it, you can really make out that beautiful nebula, which we call the Orion Nebula. Now, if you're curious what exactly a nebula is, how it forms, all of that, we actually have a whole show that we're going to be doing on that next Saturday, Eli, I believe? Or Saturday, yeah, in
Saturday.
2 weeks.
2 weeks from now.
Yeah, 2 weeks from now. We're going to do a whole show all about nebulae. So come check out that show in 2 weeks if you want to learn more all about these. But it is a beautiful nebula and one of my favorite things to look at through a telescope in the winter sky. All right. So, as I said, we have the Winter Hexagon up, so there are more constellations here than just Orion. So Orion actually has 2 hunting dogs with him, and we can find them by taking Orion's belt, connecting them in a line, and going down till we get to this very bright star right here. This bright star is the star Cirrus. Cirrus is actually the brightest star in the nighttime sky, and it's a part of the Greek constellation of Canis Major, or the Big Dog, which is why Cirrus is often known as the Dog Star. And for any Harry Potter fans out there, this was inspiration for J.K. Rowling, and why Sirius Black, his animagus, is a dog. And if there are any fans out there of the Sirius XM radio, is it a channel station company?
It's like its own
Yeah.
thing.
If you're a fan of Sirius XM,
Yeah.
their logo is a dog. Again, because Sirius is the dog star. So to see the dog, there's a couple of different ways. I'm going to show you my way, and then when I turn on the constellation lines, you're going to see a different way of portraying the dog. So the way I see it is Cirrus is the dog's eye, and then we have his ears. His mouth is open because he's kind of barking, and then we have his body, and then some little legs down here. So that's how I see it. You'll see here the way the program draws it is that Cirrus is more of like the heart of the dog. And then what I saw as the ears is the head and then the body. Again, this is just kind of highlighting the imagination needed to turn some of these groups of stars into these pictures. And there's really not a right or wrong way to do it, because it's a little bit of art there, right? Kind of interpreting the stars into what you see. So this is the big dog. Orion has a second hunting dog, Canis Minor, the little dog, which I have to say is probably the funniest constellation out there. So to find it, we're going to hop from Cirrus up and to the left to this bright star here. This is Procyon, and it's the brightest star in Canis Minor, the little dog. But let me show you the little dog. Okay, so it's this star, Procyon, and this one. Yeah, it's two stars. It's a stick, or I guess you could call it a wiener dog. I'm still kind of scratching my head over, two stars being another dog, but there you go, more imagination. So those are Orion's two hunting dogs. Now Orion, yes.
Really quick, we've got a couple questions, and I'm going to answer a question that I had myself.
Okay.
So SiriusXM Radio is a satellite radio company.
Mm-hmm.
It's like its own service thing. It's not like a radio station. That
Mm-hmm.
was possibly, I don't know why that caught my attention, but it did. Next question, does the Big Dipper ever disappear from the view of the Northern Hemisphere? It depends on where you are, and only parts of it disappear, right?
Yes. So that's what I was saying. The closer you are to the equator, the further down the Big Dipper can be on your horizon. And for some people, especially right on the equator, it does actually disappear for half the year.
And then the next question, the green flash, does this fall under astronomy, or what would it be considered? I don't know what is meant by green flash. I'm either thinking Aurora or the SpaceX satellites.
No, so I know what they're talking about. So the green flash is a phenomenon that you can sometimes see at sunset, which is from the kind of bending of light as it passes through our atmosphere. Sometimes you'll get a little flash of green from the sun's light. So it is. It's an atmospheric phenomena from the light from the sun getting bent as it travels through the kind of thicker atmosphere that it has to get through for us at sunset. So it's similar to why the sky is blue during the day and why it turns red and orange in the evening. You have just the right setup for the sun and its light and the thickness of the atmosphere to sometimes catch a little flash of green coming from the sun.
Cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I've never heard of it before.
I've heard of it. I've never gotten a chance to see it.
It sounds like it's pretty rare. I'm up on Wikipedia right now.
Yeah, it's very rare. You have to have the exact specific conditions for it to happen. All right, so back to our winter hexagon here. We have Orion and his 2 hunting dogs. Now they are currently on the hunt for our next constellation, which if we take Orion's belt and this time go up with it, it's going to point us to this V here, with this bright red star being Aldebaran. So this V is the kind of eyes and nose of Taurus the bull. And so Aldebaran is one of his eyes, then this is his other eye, we have his snout, his horns kind of come up this way, and then his body stretches out this way. And so that is Taurus the bull. Now, in Taurus sits a little grouping of stars that some people will mistake for the Little Dipper, because it does kind of have the same shape as a dipper, and it's very small, but it's not the Little Dipper. It's, if anything, maybe a micro or a mini dipper. This is actually a group of stars known as the Pleiades star cluster. To our eyes, unaided without the use of a telescope, if you have really good vision, you can see 6 or 7 bright stars, which is why it's often associated with the numbers either 6 or 7. So another name you may have heard for it is the Seven Sisters. But the star cluster is actually made up of several hundreds of stars. And if you could zoom in on it with a telescope, you'd see a lot more of those stars. You could also, if you have a camera that can take a longer exposure, you can make out some of these beautiful kind of blue lit clouds, which are more nebulae, just gases that are in between these stars. Another fun fact, if anyone has a Subaru, if you've ever noticed their logo is a bunch of stars, that's because the Japanese name for this group of stars is Subaru, and so their logo is actually the cluster. All right. So we have 2 constellations left in our winter hexagon. So we are going to jump from the Eye of Taurus, kind of follow his horns up, and then we get to this kind of squished pentagon here, with the brightest star being Capella. This squished pentagon is Auriga the Charioteer. And this is another one that you will see many different interpretations for how you see a charioteer, a guy driving a chariot. The way I picture him is as if the bulk of this constellation is the chariot itself. And so we have a wheel and the kind of like basket or cart of the chariots. And then this is Auriga's head peeking out over the top. And he seems to be kind of a bad chariot driver because his chariot is, upside down right now. All right, and then the last constellation in our winter hexagon sits in between Auriga and our little dog here. And it is this group of stars with these 2 bright stars, Castor and Pollux. And this is the Gemini Twins. So Castor here has a long body and short little legs, and Pollux has a short body and long legs, and they're both kind of arm in arm as they're walking along the Milky Way. Now, Castor and Pollux in many, many, many different stories are always the mischievous troublemakers. They get into a lot of trouble. And one of my favorite stories actually depicts the 2 brothers during a time when they decided to crash a wedding. And they kidnapped the bride and ran off with her. So instead of being arm in arm, it's seen as if this is actually the bride that they're carrying as they run away. It's just, really cute, fun story. All right, so those are our 6 winter hexagon constellations. Orion, Taurus the Bull, Auriga, Gemini Twins, Canis Minor, the little dog, and Canis Major, the big dog. And that is our winter hexagon. And I will turn the art on for those, and you will see, like I said, Auriga, interesting choice for some art there. Canis Minor, they did a lot of imagining to turn that into a little dog. But again, those are our Winter Hexagon. Now, there is a constellation that sits between the dogs that I've always wanted to be able to see and to be able to point it out. And since I have this program, I can cheat a little bit and just click a star that I know is in the area and it'll come up. But in between our two dogs is actually a unicorn. And I love showing this in this program because the way the art is drawn, it looks like the little dog is riding the unicorn, which I love. And that is like my headcanon now is the little dog rides on the unicorn to go into battle with Orion because he's too little to go on his own, and I just love it. All right, we are at about half an hour, so I will end it there. Lots of cool things to go out and see in the winter sky, and not just those constellations. We also saw some other cool objects, that's the word, that we can go and take a look at in the winter sky. All right, well, do we have any other questions?
Mm-mm.
No? All right. Well, we will give that another couple minutes. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comments. We'll wait a little bit longer to see if any more do come through. And while we wait, let me tell you what's coming up over the next week. So on Wednesday, we are doing our Beginner's Guide to Telescopes show, since we know that this is a time of year that you may be thinking about getting a telescope, either for yourself or a loved one who's interested in getting their first telescope. And we know that it can be a little overwhelming, all of the different types and choices out there. So we want to tell you a little bit of just background on what exactly all of these things mean and give you some of our recommendations for good beginner telescopes. And then next Saturday, we're going to go on an adventure through the universe and see as much of the universe as we can in about 30 minutes. It's always a fun show to do. All right. Let's see if we have any other questions. Looks like we do. I have a hard time seeing the shapes when I'm looking at the sky. How did the ancients ever decide what was what? Some of it is imagination. Some of it is using their culture as an influence. Because all of the stories that are associated with different cultures, constellations, have some significance. Whether it's mythologies, folklore, even just history, they used the stars to keep those stories alive and pass them down. And it was also a form of entertainment at that time. So some of it was just good imagination. Some of it was, we have this story and that shape of stars could kind of look like something associated with it, so we'll just go with that. But I agree, it can be, that's one of the things that I think people don't always understand right away, and they come to like planetarium shows thinking, oh yes, I'm going to see the show and suddenly the patterns are going to make sense, I'm going to be able to see all these great shapes and pictures in the sky, and that's really not the case. There are a few constellations that do look like they're quote-unquote supposed to, but for the most part, yeah, you really got to use some imagination. I don't know, I think the little dog is a good example of that. The teapot that's supposed to be the centaur is another good example. And then, of course, you can forget the great square that is supposed to be the flying horse Pegasus. Yeah, still unsure how the Greeks came up with that one. And I will say other cultures do tend to make a bit more sense than the Greeks. Like I said, having the Persian camel hump for Cassiopeia makes a lot of sense. And then I believe is it Dakota or Ojibwe that see Pegasus as the turtle shell?
Dakota.
I
I
think
actually
it's.
don't.
I don't remember, and I feel bad for not remembering. But turtle shell makes a lot more sense for square.
So we just got another question. Do the positions shift over centuries, or are they constant within the seasons? Like talking about like, would people back then have seen what we see now? And specifically, she asked 1880s. I mean, 140 years probably isn't enough time for much to change at all.
So the stars themselves do move. Everything is moving around the center of our galaxy, but because they're so far away, those movements are incredibly small. So we're talking, you won't really see changes until you're looking thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So some of these shapes have changed since when like the Greeks first depicted them. But for the most part, the shapes haven't changed too much yet, but they will. They're not always going to look like that.
What has probably changed more on like a grand time frame is like not the shapes of the constellations, but like the positions of them relative to like other landmarks. Like they'll stay next to the same constellations, but like if you see the Big Dipper over here right now, a couple thousand years ago, you might have seen it over there or something like that. Like that's what would change because of precession.
Yeah, and like you said, so precession is the fact that our North Pole is not always pointed at Polaris like it is today. And so that can change exactly where the constellations show up in our sky.
But they would see like the same patterns, like the constellations would be the same relative to one another, just not the same. Like you wouldn't look
for us. Yeah.
It's weird to think about. And like it's cool how they figure that stuff out too, because like they'll see like patterns or stuff in like old archaeological digs, and they'll realize like, oh, that looks like this pattern of stars, but as far as we know, it's over here right now. It's not down there. It's cool how they figure that stuff out.
And they knew that back then. I mean, it was what the Greek astronomer Hipparchus was the guy who figured it out based off of star charts from thousands of years before him. Comparing those to the sky he saw in his day, he was able to figure out that precession and that kind of shift in how the sky looks to us, which I think is amazing.
That's pretty cool. To make a long answer or a short answer long.
Yeah. It will change, but it'll be thousands and thousands of years before you see a difference. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to end it before we get way too complicated with our answers. Thank you everyone so much for joining us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this December constellation show. We are still planning on streaming regularly Wednesdays and Saturdays at 7 p.m. Central. We'll be taking a little break at the end of December, but other than that, we're planning on keeping up with this for now. Yeah, so if you like what we do, you can check out the upcoming streams that we have. They're in the event section of our Facebook page. You can also go back and see any past streams we've done in the video section or on our YouTube channel. But again, thanks for hanging out with us. We hope you enjoyed it and have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Bye, everyone.